so I found this support group on Facebook. And I was talking to people online, and all of a sudden in my private messages, this gentleman messaged me. And of course, over time, as I got to know this person, he was saying, "Oh, I've been watching your YouTube videos. Oh, I've been, the flattery and the connection." But on the same token, it was like, well, maybe you can help me because I just lost my wife 7 years ago, and I haven't dated anyone at all since. He's poured his heart into his work, and he told me the circumstances of his wife's death. And when I say he, remember, this is not one person. This is a organized story that they cook up. What if the best chapter of your life hasn't even begun yet? What lies within you is the power to live brighter, bolder, and truer than ever before. So welcome to Vivatude, where caregiving, connections, and career come into balance, and where your vitality, vision, and voice shines through. Because the revolution isn't out there, it's already within you. Welcome to Vivatude.
Welcome back to Vivatude. I'm Lauren Archer, and today we are talking with Suzanne Newman about a very personal story of how Suzanne was in a vulnerable position and ended up being targeted by a scam network. So Suzanne, welcome back. I'd love to have you take us from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
What happened? Where were you in your life? And how did
Yeah.
all this begin?
Yeah. Wow. Well, in the month of October, I separated from my husband. And I was married for 15 years. It was emotional. And obviously, I had been through trauma. I have hit a violent temper tantrum, and that lasted for about 45 minutes. Um, and as a result, I was dealing with what I know now is PTSD. I had serious anxiety. I wasn't sleeping. All of those things. I was in a very vulnerable situation. And then on top of it, which is really interesting, of course, is now facing aging alone. I was about to turn 70. I was looking at all kinds of scenarios of how do I do, how do we move forward? How do I move forward alone in the world? And the other piece of that, Lauren, is I wasn't lonely, but I was alone. And I was alone in my marriage too, because I didn't have emotional support from him. I didn't have any sort of engagement emotionally from him. He was very much, just disconnected from anything that I had to say. So I was really vulnerable in the fact that I needed somebody to care about me. And at the time I remember I remember thinking this was interesting around November time period that I could have died in my house and nobody would have known for months. It was that kind of a silly, but that's where you're at. You're in that situation of, you know, you try and you do whatever you can to care for other people, and you go the extra mile, and you hold everything on your shoulders, and you do everything, and you try everything, and you try to be a good wife, and it still goes sideways. And when you look at that, I mean, I was the sole breadwinner of my marriage. I was, you know, I held everything together, everything, and so when he left, there was this vapid space of, now I have to do it alone on the other side, but I'm still doing it. But there was this relief of how do I navigate now? But the biggest part was I had to give up a dream that I really had when I got married because I did love him at one time. I did have hopes for, growing old together. But then things change and you realize that that's not going to happen. And so when that does happen, there's this feeling of, you know, needing, just not knowing what to do or where to turn. And here I am, the ultimate, senior care, expert about telling people, to have a community, have a, don't isolate yourself. And what I was doing basically is I was in a serious depression. And then the holidays came along. I kind of was and none of my friends really believed me when I told them the story. It was like they would placate me, but they didn't necessarily, they would say things. I had one friend say to me, "Well, you two just weren't good for each other."
Like that's helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Or she said, "Well, that's not my experience of him. You weren't,
Mm. So
so
on top of the way you were feeling, then it's like not really feeling validated, not
no,
feeling seen.
no.
Uh, and so all of this is happening in your private world.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, you're
And then
putting
I'm
on
putting a
your
smile on
face.
and doing my show.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So the real disconnect between having that sense of connection, the sense of
Hmm.
attachment to something,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then what was happening in your personal world. And I'm imagining that there's probably a few people in our audience that can relate to that story.
Yeah. And the thing is, Lauren, which is really interesting, is that I really want to emphasize I didn't feel lonely. I enjoyed being in the house by myself with my dogs. I loved, decorating the house the way I wanted to put it together. I didn't have somebody, whining and complaining about what I did or how I did it. I could cook the food that I wanted to make, which was healthy instead of stuff like what he wanted, and all of the things that, you know, that I realized, I don't have to do this anymore. I can have, a salad for dinner. I don't have to worry about, you know, meat and potatoes and everything else, right? So there was this freedom at the same time, but I was still trying to figure it out. And so when Christmas happened, Christmas Eve is usually it's my holiday. It's not his, by the way, he's Jewish. Um, I was, we were originally supposed to go to some friend's house for Christmas Eve. And he ended up refusing to leave so that I couldn't. So I chose to stay home because I didn't want to be around him. I was traumatized by him. And so I couldn't do that. And so I sat there by myself after I paid like $200 for a charcuterie board and made the food and everything. And I sent that over to the party. But I was excluded by myself but there was no concessions made for the trauma that I was in. So there was that piece right there. And so I found this support group on Facebook. And I was talking to people online, and all of a sudden, in my private messages, this gentleman messaged me. And of course, I'm so public in when I talk about my show, right? So, it's in my Facebook profile has my podcast there. I mean, and that's part of, when you're a public figure like we are, you and I are, there's
Mhm.
that element of, you put your heart out there for people, especially in my world where trust is everything. And so, over time, as I got to know this person, he was saying, "Oh, I've been watching your YouTube videos. Oh, I've been, the flattery and the connection." But on the same token, it was like, "Well, maybe you can help me because I just lost my wife 7 years ago, and it's been seven, and I haven't dated anyone at all since, and I'm trying to figure it out." And then he started telling me about, he's poured his heart into his work, and he told me the circumstances of his wife's death. And when I say he, remember, this is not one person. This is a organized story that they cook up, right?
Hmm.
And the story was that he was FaceTiming with his wife in in a car. She her head turned a certain way. She went off of a bridge, and he watched on FaceTime as she died in the car in underwater. And of
Wow.
course, you hear this, read this story, right? And Lauren, you're sitting there going, oh, this poor person, this poor man. And he told me his name, Robert Victor. He told me, about his daughter who is a fashion designer and her name is Scarlett. And he told me that she lives in LA and he's in the process of semi-retired and he's been doing so well at crypto. He's going down in a week to buy her a house because she's getting married.
Oh
And
my.
so you realize that, you're thinking, wow, what a nice person. You just don't, and you don't even realize because, again, there's nothing involving me. I'm just listening at that point. But what's
Hmm.
happening is the emotional hook, right?
Hmm.
He knew that I was probably right to help people because of my podcast and because of my what I've done for as long as I have. I mean, my gosh, you know, this is the thing when you're a content creator, you've got content out there. I have thousands of episodes out there on the internet. So this is not I can't really hide from
Right.
this, right? The only thing that I can do or any of us can do is protect ourselves. So that's how it got involved. And we talked easily back and forth for over a month. And it just started out as a friendship, right? And then it started switching of, when I shared the story of my marriage, and he would say things like, well, I would never do this to you. I would, and so then all of a sudden there was a little bit of future pacing. Like, you're the kind of person that I'd want to spend the rest of my life with, and all of the ways in which, that evolved. Luckily, I never let it take go to a point of where I really got hooked in, right? Because there was a little voice in the back of me, and I will tell you what that voice was. Um, Number one, why could I never talk to him live on Zoom, right? It was
Hmm.
always on text, except for
Hmm.
two short phone calls. And I mean short, 3 minutes. That was it. Anything else was done in text messages. And so but it was always another story of why he couldn't come home, why it couldn't happen. And so it was just through the month of January and February really was our dialogue of easily thousands of texts and all day long. And every morning it's good morning, the consistency of that every night, that checking in during the day. Did you eat lunch? Are you okay? It's that constant attention that I never got in my marriage that all of a sudden now somebody cared about me. And so that's how it started. And that was easily for a month now, but not necessarily. He talked about crypto. Yes, he talked about how much money he was making, and he was showing me screen grabs of trades that he was making. And so some of the screen grabs that he showed me, like one day he made $17,000. So you
So there you are in a vulnerable position. You have someone who has a story that sounds believable. He's giving you specific details, names, places, emotional content. You're opening up your heart. You're feeling connected with this person.
yeah,
And then he's validating you.
yeah.
He's giving you the consistent attention, the feedback that
That I
you
cried,
weren't
that I
getting.
craved, right?
Right,
But
right.
and the thing is, I fed everything to him, Lauren, because I was pouring my heart out. I didn't think anything of it. It was like it was somebody that cared about me and shared, a little bit of this story. So those are
Yeah.
things.
Well, and that's human, right? That's human to respond to a human connection. Uh, and and then he's showing you something financial that appears to just be
Mhm.
about him. He's not
Yeah,
trying to say you
yeah.
should do this. He's it appears that he's saying this is how I'm making money. Now you're in a
Hmm.
vulnerable position.
Hmm.
Your dreams have just been shot and you're wondering how am I going to move
Retire.
forward,
How am I
right?
going to live the rest of my life? And all of a sudden I sit there and think, and then all of a sudden it moved into, I'll teach you. I'll
Mm,
teach you to do this. And to me, I was like, I was interested in crypto because people talk about it, but I don't know
yep.
anything about it. I wasn't signed up on it. I did never played in it. I didn't know really what the potential was. I didn't know anything. But what I did know was that there's a lot of affirmations that are going to be happening and in Congress that once certain things happen, it's going to open up. I've heard the rumblings, I'd
Yes.
heard things like that. And then the other thing that he kept doing is he kept validating the fact that, he would say, I made $6,000 today. If you would have put in $1,000, you would have made like 300 bucks.
Mm-hmm.
So now all of a sudden you're starting to see this scenario, and that's really what happened. And the other side of it then is I said, well, here's the thing, I'll give you $500. I'll do it, put $500 in. That was my first step. So he, of course, he does this all through screen grabs, through text message. There was never any, get on the phone, help me do any of this. It was like, go on to crypto and sign in and do this, send me a screenshot, and then I'll tell you what to press. And so through the whole process, that's what I did. And it was back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And it was very stressful because I didn't know what I was doing, and I was having to go in and out on my phone in between a crypto app and between the text, which was just insane. It was nuts. And um, and then what happened, which was just really crazy, was that I put in the $500 and we run it through this. He we ended up doing a we went on to Coinbase, which is called Base now, and then he moved me to another platform, which was called something option VP. And well, I didn't know what that was, but by this time I'd been talking to this person that was showing me everything, and I thought, okay, so I just moved it off onto that. Well, that's an outside book, right? So the fact that it's an outside book, there's no trace to that. But I didn't know because again, I'm unknown, right? So
Right.
then what happened was, with this is kind of interesting. Um, he says, "Well, let me see what we can do. Now that you're there, it's going to take another day, but and then we'll come back and we'll trade on your $500." And so we traded on my $500. I made $200. It was like huge. He goes, "The market's like amazing today." So then it shows this new balance of $700. And I'm going like, how did you do, how that is incredible. So now I start seeing all this stuff. And he
Yes.
keeps sending me stuff like, oh, well, I just made 20 grand. I did this. Oh, by the way, I was able, just so you know, in the last month, I've made like 90 grand. And he was trading like 250,000. You could see that he was up in these numbers. So it wasn't, and again, I don't know these things, but
Right.
I was seeing it on the screen. Well, what it was is all fake. It was
Hmm.
all fake. But I didn't realize at the time. So I thought, okay, I'm going to give you 2 grand. And I say give you, I put it on crypto.
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
put 2 grand on crypto. It wasn't a lot of money, thank goodness. But then I needed, because of something, I needed to withdraw some money out. And he goes, sure. So automatically I withdrew $500 back out. And he gave it to me. I mean, he helped me do it and I got it back. So then what happened was I ended up going ahead and, just getting that money back out. It was like no problem. And it was in my bank account.
That actually reinforces your belief that this is
Yes,
safe, right?
yes,
And I would
yes.
say anybody in your shoes, really, you're in a situation where you have no emotional connection, you're traumatized from a relationship, you're feeling vulnerable. Now there's this person who is giving you all this attention, and you're building what feels like trust. And
Mhm.
he's demonstrating hope, and he's showing you what's possible,
And
and
he's giving me money back.
you're feeling empowered. You're feeling like I am learning something. This feels safe. This is exciting. Look at what's possible. I can see how anybody in your position would make those same conclusions.
Yeah,
And then,
yeah,
yes, getting that 500 back, it's like, oh, well, there's validation
yeah,
that this is
yeah.
okay.
But then he started pressuring me.
Let's take a pause here. Let's come back in the next segment
Okay.
and get into what happens after that. And I want everybody to really pay attention and stay tuned.
And thanks for listening to Vivatude. 4 hosts, one each week. We help you revivatude your next chapter because purpose, passion, and prosperity isn't out there. They're already within you. Brighter, bolder, truer. Vivatude.